Feeling the need for change is at the heart of your ability to make it happen. Welcome to Turning Inward. I'm Vivian Carrasco, your teacher, mentor, midwife, and host of this amazing podcast. Together, we're going to navigate our interior lives. We're going to unearth our own personal truth, our insights, and our inner knowing. Change what you see in the world, how you make decisions, and the way you lead yourself and others. Welcome back to the Turning Inward podcast. And today is just you and me. So these conversations aren't as easy for me as the ones that I have with other people, because I love to dance in the dialogue and see what comes from our conversation. And even though I'm imagining looking at you, I actually have a bit more of a difficult time pulling out that conversation without that back and forth. But here goes. So I'm using a new audio device. I'm hoping that this gives you a little bit better quality in your ear as you're walking your dog, on your way to somewhere, or just sitting and listening while you enjoy nature. However it is that you listen to this podcast, I'm very appreciative that you share with me your most valuable resource, which is your time, and I do hope that it adds value to your life. So I have two grown men. They're 23 and 27 years old, and I've had the joy of being their mother. And we just had Mother's Day pass. And I was very humbled by the compliments that I receive on the guys and who they are. And so I wanted to share with you some insights that I have looking back on raising them and what I think matters. But I also very much recognize that the way that I see how they were raised might be very different from the way they see how they were raised. You know, that happens with any human being. We live in our own story. Our mind makes meaning from the puzzle that it sees when you open your eyes. And so looking back, well, I'll tell you the first lesson I learned. And I didn't really learn it when I should have, but I got a hint of it pretty early on. And I'm still learning it now. So I was a young mother, and because of my insecurity or with lack of experience other than cousins, you know, when you grow up in a family where your mom is one of 13 and you have lots of cousins around. So I wasn't nervous about, changing diapers, caring for a baby. I was nervous about raising Joshua, about being responsible for Joshua and his development. It was really important to me. I've absolutely always had a really strong interest in how we learn and grow as human beings. And so Joshua became sort of my first dissertation and my first research into, how does this work? And I literally dived into child development and did pretty much everything by the book. But one of the things I recognized pretty early on is, and I'm not sure exactly where I experienced it, but someone brought to my attention that Joshua wasn't speaking as much as he should for his age. And I realized that either I had missed it or nothing in the books had explicitly said to be in conversation with Josh. Now, he was loved and cared for and nurtured, but I never spoke to him, and then I realized that it was because he couldn't speak to me. Which is kind of funny because a few years later, we were walking home from German kinderschool in Germany. He was 4 years old. And he actually took over a conversation between myself and the woman in the bakery. It wasn't the normal woman who was about my generation. It was a generation before her, an older woman who didn't speak as much English. And so we couldn't communicate so well. Well, Joshua jumped in and, carried out the transaction for me in German. And when I walked out of that bakery, I dropped down to my knees and I looked at Josh and I said, Josh, why don't you ever talk to me in German? I didn't know you spoke it. I mean, he went to a German kinderschool where the nuns only spoke German, but I guess I didn't catch it. And he looked at me with just, the face of a 4-year-old and said, because, Mama, you don't speak German, you speak English. And so that experience was reflected back to me. But what I learned in that, or what I should have learned in that lesson, is that my need for control and my fear around not doing things right led me to an over-reliance on books and information. And it didn't really develop, even though I know I had it, it didn't really let me develop my own knowing. I trusted those books probably more than I trusted myself. And that wasn't cool. So that's what I want to share as my biggest lesson when it comes to parenting. And I sort of alluded to in that first lesson. But I see children as teachers. And so I learn and listen and watch just the same way that I do with all humans, but especially with children. And I think one of the things that I try to remind myself, even to this day, when I'm around children, and children that haven't gotten to the point where society and the culture and where they've learned to sort of say or do what it is they think you want them to do, where they're just in their essence, in their element. I just try to pay attention to that and try to pay attention to them. And for the children that are near me, sort of keep memories, so that I can look back and say, do you remember when you wanted to do this? Or do you remember when you were excited to do that? Or do you remember when this was most interesting to you? And the memory that comes to mind for that with the guys was Jacob was 6 and Joshua was 10 and David had deployed after 9/11. And we would record videos to send David so he could keep up with what was going on in our lives. And there was one instance where the boys were so very proud of this camp they had made. It was across the street from us. We lived at Fort Lee. And they said, come, let us show Daddy our camp. And it was interesting because Joshua sort of led us over there. And then when we got to the camp, he described all the areas. We do this here and this is where we do that. And sort of an operational look of how everything was managed. And interestingly enough, Jacob sort of stood close to the street. And if a car would pass by, he'd say, everybody down. So he was like the outlook. And Joshua was the logistician, the one who looked at how everything moved and where people came in and out. And when I look at my men now, Jacob, even though he's a student at TCU, he's also in the National Guard as a cavalry scout. So he literally does, in the military, exactly how he would play when he was 6. And Joshua is a logistician. He's an officer in the Quartermaster Corps who does what he did at 10. And I think that's fascinating. If you can think back to how you played when you were young, I think we're like an acorn. There's an oak tree in it, and we just have to give it the right nutrients, the right environment for it to grow. And it doesn't take a lot of force, It just happens naturally when you let it. And so we and the things that we enjoy can happen that same way. When I did this exercise with my cousins, the memory that came up most from them and resonated with me was teaching my cousins to play games. And I feel like that's what I do and within university right now, is we learn together in a playful way skills. Now the skills could be habit change, how to learn, building understanding and awareness around ourselves. But we're still playing a game together. It might not be jacks or something like that, but we're learning to play in life. And, I think it's critical. It's important to learn to play because our education system, God love it, was designed in the industrial age to prepare factory workers. And that's not what we do today. Most of us don't go into a factory from 9 to 5. We're not on an assembly line where there is no thinking. We're expected to be creative, to innovate, to work in teams. It's a totally different environment than the education system was designed for. So learning is different. There's a quote that I wrote down in my outline for tonight that says, knowledge is only a rumor until it lives in the bones. And that's from the Asado tribe. And that's what I see these two things, these first two lessons, that I had to trust myself more than I trusted the books. And that the boys would teach me and show me what they needed me to know if I just paid enough attention. So the third lesson that I wrote down is, and I attribute it to giving them choices. I think it was important that they have choices, no matter how old they were. As long as they were old enough to be able to distinguish between the choices. And I think that I learned that from parenting with love and logic. But I also realized that I had to understand what it was that they couldn't say sometimes. So I remember getting down again, this was before they were taller than me, getting down to my knees so that I would be eye level with them. And just mentally going through, are they hungry? Do they need a hug right now? Or are they tired? And I honestly find that I do that with myself to this day. Because if I'm not paying attention and I'm trying to drive through, get something done, or meet somebody else's expectations in some way, it'll end up so much better if I recognize what I'm needing and how to do that. So one of the things that I remember from parenting with love and logic is boys can be very, I'll say just stubborn, even though I'm a girl and I'm stubborn too. Let's say it was cold outside. Instead of saying to Jacob or Josh, put on your jacket, I might say, do you want to put your jacket on now or do you want to carry it with you? And what I think this did, and I'm grateful that it happened, is it allowed them to make choices for themselves really, really early on. So it was never an option like, don't take your jacket because, I didn't want them to get frostbite or sick. But, you either carry it or you wear it. But either way, it's going with you. And that's a skill that I even use to this day with the children I'm around. And I find that it gives them some comfort to feel a sense of control. Because we all need that, right? Even though I know now that the amount of things that I control versus the amount of things that I don't have control over are literally 1,000,000 to 1. But it still makes me feel safe when there's a box that I can feel like I can control. Whether it's the air conditioner or, how high the windows are up or whatever, So choices, remembering that people need to feel, whatever age they are, to feel a sense of agency, a sense of mastery over something, a sense of, I am doing this. And little ones, and I'm not a parenting expert, obviously, I've only parented 2 children. Little ones need to develop not, what do I want to do right now? And maybe having a choice between this or that helps them to develop those decisions. My guess is it did. I'm attributing it to what made my guys so awesome. And I'm able to talk this way now only because I really, really moved out of empty nest. That empty nest syndrome was really tough for me. And I told myself, and I shared that I'm snuggled sweetly into the role of being the mother of men. Identity shifts are tough. And going from being, 2 boys and me, which is what I would have had as my license plate back in the day, and the mother of men is a very different role in my life. And I'm cleanly out of the previous one and nestled sweetly into this one. And I think that's really why I can look back and see maybe and share with you what I saw about raising them. I mentioned earlier that they taught me a lot and that I love learning from children. What I learned that I think was the most important from raising Joshua and Jacob is the example, the experience that I had of loving them. The knowing, their happiness is more important than my own. And not in a self-sacrificing, you can have everything sort of way, but in, if that decision doesn't align with what I want for you, that's okay, if it's what makes you happy. They taught me that. They taught me, I don't know what it was to have your heart live outside of your own body. And as we move through life, as I move through life and as I gather more experience, it's like a fine wine, that experience of loving them and understanding, trying to understand where they are and recognizing them for where they are right now. Because it's really easy for us to see the person that we think we want them to be or that they used to be. So it takes a lot of effort, a lot of intention, conscious, present conversations where I'm getting to know them over and over again. My husband and I have been married almost 3 decades, and I've probably been married to, I'd say, at least 4 different men in that period of time. same man, but 4 different identities. And I expect if we live to be 100, that he will evolve. I will evolve. We'll all evolve into a different form of our identity at least another 6 times. And navigating those changes and those transitions takes intention. Otherwise, when I look at Joshua, instead of seeing a 27-year-old, in his stage of life, I might see an 18-year-old, So that's what I try to do even now, that they are men, is get to know who they are, what their needs are, and where they are. Just like I did when they were 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8, and 9, and 10. It just changes. Instead of, are you hungry? Do you need a hug? Or are you tired? It's more subtle. And I'm still learning how to do that, so I don't have a lot of insight for you there. I also wanted to share with you, if you are a parent, even if you're not a parent, there's this idea that we move through life getting ourselves through it, figuring things out, not needing help. And that's just impossible. Even though I didn't have the advantage of having my mom near me to help me raise the boys, I did have my baby sister come and stay with us once. And I had the help of nannies and after-school caregivers and at-home caregivers and daycares and, teachers and coaches. It took an entire village to raise my children. It was never something that I did alone. Even though at times I felt lonely doing it, I learned to create the support structure that I needed to support me in raising them, or to ask for help and to help others. So we did it as a community, as a little village. So we mom together. We are mothered by so many people. And I know that my boys were mothered by lots of different teachers and mentors. So if you don't have a support structure, look at how you can build one. Or what it is that you need so that you can ask for help. Oh, here's another note I made. One of the things that I thought was, so there was an experience that we had when Jacob was fairly young. He was very candidly truthful from always. And one time he said something to someone that I could tell hurt their feelings. And it wasn't that he had told a lie. It was just stating an obvious truth, but it wasn't kind. And I'm not sure how old he was. He might have been 5. After that experience, we created values, what was important to us, and we created a mission statement. And I couldn't find it for this, but I do remember 2 really important parts of it. Because in that experience, Jacob kept telling me, but Mom, it's true. It's true. What I said is true. And I was like, yeah, it is true, Jake, but it wasn't kind. And so our mission statement for the family when the boys were super young stuck with us. And it, I think, created a culture for our family. It helped them to identify what was most important to us. We all have different things that we value that have different priorities in our lives. But for us at this period of time, and what guided us for, years after that, was tell the truth, but be kind. Another part that I remember is thank God for our blessings, or be thankful for our blessings. So gratitude has always been central to who we are and how we move through the world. Being grateful. And truth with kindness. I don't remember what the other parts were, but it was funny. So I wanted to share that because I believe that was like the soup that we swam in. And so it designed how they saw and how they reacted in the world. And to this day, they're super kind. Pleases and thank yous, obviously, because they grew up in the South. But I hear from folks how good they are. Not perfect, obviously. No one's perfect. I'm not perfect. And no one expects anyone to be that way. But they're good guys. I'm really, really proud of them. So those are the things that I wanted to share as I thought through this period of my life where I'm the mother of men, and what was most meaningful to me as I was raising the boys. And I hope that that's helpful for you, because we're still raising ourselves. In the 20th century, we sort of made up these roles that we will learn for a period of time, maybe up to 24 years. We'll work for a period of time, maybe 30 years, and then we'll retire at 65. And that's not the way that the world is anymore. I mean, every year we gain more life. I mean, the breakthroughs in science and so forth, we're projected to live to be in our 90s and 100s. So moving through us raising ourselves happens over and over and over again. And I alluded to that when I said that David, has been 4 different people, and the boys, they're always changing. I have to pay attention to who they are right then. And it's the same with us. Our roles, we let some roles go and we pick up others. And those transitions are tough for us. I actually had an experience today where somebody asked me my occupational title. I'm going to pull this text up because it gave me a little tiny existential crisis. I'm like, what is my title? What do I want to say? Because it was such a loaded question for me because it says who I am. And it wasn't easy for me to just spit out with confidence who I am. So here's what I replied. Leadership development is the industry. Transformational coach and executive mentor is my LinkedIn title, in case it was for a professional audience. Mindset mentor and creative midwife is my more casual Twitter version. But in a nutshell, what I do is I teach on mindset, habit change, and navigating life's transitions. So they replied, is life coach okay? And I started laughing. I said, yeah, life coach is fine. Yeah, it's fine. Because being a compassionate witness to people's transitions and helping them move through obstacles to get through their goals, that's totally cool. And hopefully this is one of those tools that's helping you do that. Because we're human and we have to learn to be human. We have to be aware of what our humanity means for us and how we can enliven ourselves, how we can live more richly, how we can build joy and wire joy into our minds. So, those are my few lessons or insights that I remember from raising my boys, and what I hope added value to your time right now. So if you have questions or comments, or if you want to engage, my email is vivian@viviancarrasco.com. My digital home is viviancarrasco.com. And I think on most major social media channels, except for Snapchat, I don't have fun on that one. So feel free to comment wherever you're hearing this podcast, or tag me on any of those social channels. Or what I'd really love is on my website, there's a place for you to enter your email and name, and it's how I stay in touch. So if you'd like to stay in touch and hear what's coming up, then please add yourself to my email list. I host quarterly learning journeys with my community, and most often I have a component of that that's public, and I'll share insights on the different social media tools about the learning journey that we're going through. So the one coming up is the power of attention and your presence, and how you can wire joy into your life. And we do it in a way that is the way we should learn, which is slow and steady, a little bit at a time every day. So if you're curious about that or want to learn more about it, visit the website, put your name and email, and I'll stay in touch and let you know what we're doing. So thanks for listening to the Turning Inward podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode. If something needs to change and you don't quite know what it is yet, tune in and turn inward. I host an online learning community where we can figure it out together. It feels like a little family, and it's a place where you can be supported and offer support, because togetherness sparks change. Visit my digital home at viviancarrasco.com to learn more.